A bear in his natural habitat. A Studebaker.
Moving right along in search of good times and good news. With good friends you can't lose.
This could become a habit.
Opportunity knocks once, let's reach out and grab it.
Yeah!
Together we'll nab it.
We'll hitchhike, bus, or yellow cab it.
Cab it? Moving right along.
Footloose and fancy free.
Getting there is half the fun, come share it with me. Moving right along. We'll learn to share the load.
We don't need a map to keep the show on the road.
Moving right along, we found a life on the highway.
And your way is my way.
So trust my navigation.
California, here we come, the pie in the skyland.
Palm trees and warm sand.
Though sadly, we just left Rhode Island.
We did what?
Oh, just forget it.
Moving right along. Hey, LA, where have you gone?
Send someone to fetch us, we're in Saskatchewan.
Moving right along. Dum, 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 dum. You take it, you know best.
Hey, I've never seen the sun come up in the west.
Moving right along, we're truly birds of a feather. We're in this together, and we know where we're going.
Movie stars with flashy cars and life with the top down.
We're storming the big town.
Yeah, storm is right. Should it be snowing?
No, I don't think so.
Moving right along. Do I see signs of men?
Welcome on the same post, it says come back again. Moving right along.
Nice town.
Footloose and fancy free.
You're ready for the big time.
Is it ready for me?
Moving right along. Moving right along. Moving right along. Moving right along.
Hello, and welcome to Sideshow. A very special episode of Sideshow, which I think they all are. If anyone hasn't figured it out yet, this is our Muppet tribute episode. Again, I'm Jacques.
I'm Joe.
And we've had a good half dozen guests. We've had more than a half dozen, but we've had a good half dozen guests. Each and every one says they had a great time. They really want to come back, but they'll say whatever they need to get out of Joe's basement. Peter, a few weeks back, came in and we did a Looney Tune episode, and Peter said, "Oh, I would love to come back." And so far,
I don't know if I said those exact words.
he said, "Would you please let me come back? This was the greatest moment of my life. Second to none. I've peaked," or something like, "Yeah, I'd do this again if you guys ask really nice."
Yes. So thank you, Peter.
How much
for
am I
joining
getting paid for this time?
Twice what we did last time.
2 times
Double.
0. Great.
Yes. So
Your agent drove a hard bargain.
Thanks, Bernie.
Yeah.
But, Joe and I have always been Muppet fans. We quote and we'll get into it, some of the lines that we quote back and forth to each other all the time. We've talked about doing one of these, but as I came to find out when Peter was here last time, just talking off mic and stuff like that, and about his side
Who's
projects,
No.
that his love for Looney Tunes and cartoons might be dwarfed by the Muppets or on parallel lines.
Something like that. Yeah, I'd say probably leans a little bit closer to the Muppets, but it depends on the day.
So for me, with the age that I am, the Muppet Movie, I
Old?
believe, came out when I was 10, and I might have seen that.
In the theater?
No, in the drive-in.
In the drive-in?
We used to go to the drive-in almost every week, sometimes 2 times a week in the summer. It was like the only thing
They let you drive at 10?
my mom could afford.
He's funny.
We haven't gotten to the Waldorf and Statler stuff yet.
That was wonderful.
It was stupendous.
Oh, but honestly, that movie, that soundtrack, it embodies that, and the Cannonball Run, I think embodies my entire childhood.
Yep. So
That explains a lot.
I got into the Muppet Show first. I saw the Muppet Show before the Muppet Movie. Oh wait, that's what you're supposed to do. Yay!
Yay!
Yay! But of course,
You are all weirdos.
I obviously was more in love with Sesame Street than the Muppet Show.
No, I was a huge Muppet. Again, episode 4, Daddy Issues. One of the few things I watched with my dad was that. And honestly, I've said 1,000 times that probably picking Don Rickles as a role model growing up ill-advised, but I was like Statler and Waldorf, or just
Waldorf.
I always say it wrong.
Waldorf.
Their
Waldorf.
timing and their whole bit. It's hands down my funniest. What I love more than anything on this planet.
Yep. If only there was a Statler and Waldorf to heckle Fox News, right? Am I right, people?
All right, so Peter, how did you fall into this? How long has this been a passion? Where did it start for you?
Sesame Street really was where it came in there, and then it just became this offshoot. The Muppet Show came on, and let's see, Muppet Show came on around 76 or so, and so I would have been 4 years old. So to me, it was kind of all the same thing, and it would just happen to be on at night rather than during the day. And especially since in the early, in one of the first couple episodes, Ernie and Bert were on, one of the episodes. I think it was Julia Prowse or right around that time. So it was kind of confusing for me. It wasn't until I was probably like around later that season that I realized that it was its own separate show. I remember that it had to have been the first season because one skit that I liked for some, as a kid was, just a running gag of just a row of houses making a few one-liners, and that only appeared in season 1. So, at least was conscious of it at that point.
So as you can see, we're not going to get into the details of the Muppet Show on this podcast.
Oh, and Joe, were you a Sesame Street guy? Because
Absolutely.
For me, they're two different worlds.
They are. I mean, they are two different worlds.
You know what freaked me out?
What's that?
There were two things that always sent me screaming, on Sesame Street, and this carried over. One of them did carry over onto the Muppet Show because it actually happened on there too. The first one was the baker falling down the stairs.
Yes.
And that old thing that scared the crap
Jim
out of me as a
Henson's
kid.
voice.
12 cherry baked souffles.
10 banana cream pies. Oh, my femur.
In retrospect, I don't know. I don't know if it was the guy falling down the stairs or just the obnoxious music. That the two things together is probably what did it. But the thing that sent me screaming even further was, a running gag with Ernie and Bert, where Ernie would take off Bert's nose. That just freaked me the hell out.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, that happened on that episode of the Muppet Show.
Yeah, I know. You shouldn't pick apart the Muppets in front of impressionable 2-, 3-year-old, 5-year-old kids.
You can,
or
you
12
can
if
pick
you're
your
in
friends, but for your friends' noses.
Yeah,
Ernie.
I wasn't a big Sesame Street kid, and
Obviously.
seriously,
Well, you were too big to be a Sesame Street kid.
but no, it's like I went straight to the Muppets. I think Sesame Street became a bigger factor like later in life when I had like small cousins who would come over, and you start to get like the adult humor kind of behind it and stuff. And there's some stuff that management and I quote back and forth from Sesame Street, which is great. But I grew up on the Muppets, and a lot of the humor that I've always loved, and anyone who's listening to the podcast, the fact that you're the same way, the fact that we're big fans of the vaudeville era and the big show and the variety show kind of, and that's all this was, and it was kind of like The Office, all the behind the scene drama and stuff like that,
Yep.
and then. And for me, even as a kid, I just loved the sense of humor, the punniness, the timing, you think you're finishing each other's thought, and then it takes a weird left turn and stuff like that. Fozzie Bear is probably in my top 20 favorite comics.
He is an icon, that's to be sure. So I guess where do you want to start with this review of the Muppets? We don't want to go too deep into because the Muppets is pretty deep. Do you want to focus on Muppet
I
Show?
didn't realize that like Frank Oz, in the 60s, like was doing television Muppet, type things until I really went down this wormhole, like reading up on it this week.
I don't think a lot of people know that the Muppets got their big. I mean, they got their break on the Ed Sullivan Show, but I mean, like they were actually featured in the first season of SNL.
Yeah, by this point, Sesame Street was already going, and
Yeah.
they hadn't quite hit the Muppet Show. But Lorne Michaels, and Jim Henson had gotten together to try and come up with a non-children's Muppet style
Version of the Muppets.
recurring sketch on Saturday Night Live. They were good in their own right, but they just really didn't mesh with the not ready for prime.
It was slow, and I think you had to be really, really high to get it.
So check one box from the Saturday Night Live audience from 1975.
Yes, and I think maybe that's why it became a recurring thing versus, all right, this isn't working, let's move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time they hit season 2, they parted ways. I think it was amicable. I mean, I don't know of any.
I think by
major-
season 2, right? That's 76. That kind of leads into the first season of the Muppet Show. I mean, when did the Muppet Show debut?
I want to say 76.
Yeah,
Don't quote me.
I believe it was 76. Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of like, it's not like they were like on the street and destitute for years waiting for their next big break to come around. It's like, oh, yeah. So I guess now, what do you want to do? You want to talk about your favorite moments from the Muppet Show?
Peter, what were just focusing on the show itself, what were some of your favorite running bits?
I mean, Veterinarian's Hospital was one that I always liked. Jerry Jewell, who did a lot of the scripts for the Muppet Show, had the saying that a joke that is too bad to tell once is much funnier when you tell it 3 times.
I think I subscribe to Joe. Do I fall into that category? That pretty much sums up my comedic timing.
What's your top 3 sketches? Go.
Top 3 sketches. Well, Statler, anything with those guys.
Yep.
The running bits with that. One of my favorite sketch from the Muppet. It's not from the Muppet Show. It's like from the Disney version, because I used to go to Disney once a week, and their pre-thing show with the Eagle. What was the American Eagle?
Sam
the American Eagle.
Like that.
Yes.
That is one of the characters. It is just. I think. The more I dive into it, I'm not sure that Colbert isn't just doing, a live action version of Sam the Eagle. And then honestly, the band. And truly to this day, I say this in all sincerity, Animal, top 5 favorite drummers of all time.
What's the band's name, Jacques? No help from the audience.
Dr. Tooth and the...
Right. And
Dr. Tooth.
Not Dr.
Mayhem.
There's more than one teeth here.
Mayhem.
on the what, Mayhem?
Magical Mayhem.
Dr. Tooth and the Magical Mayhem is wrong.
Oh, I hate you.
It's Dr. Teeth and the Electric
Mayhem. Damn it.
Gosh darn it. Yeah, but
and the chick in that band, hot.
Right. Very hot.
For sure.
My toss-up is between the Swedish Chef. I mean, just the fact that you had real-life hands incorporated into a Muppet just blew my mind as a child. And then the other thing, of course, would be Pigs in Space.
Pigs in Space. Featuring the master of the swine trek, the intrepid and well-fed Link Hogthrob. And as first mate and second in command, the very cute and extremely dangerous Miss Piggy. And the super brain behind this whole ghastly mistake, the inexplicable Dr. Julius Strangeport. As you recall, last week the spaceship Swine Trek was on a suicidal collision course with a mysterious celestial object.
It's coming straight at us, but I can't tell what it is.
It looks like the headlight on a motorcycle.
We know what it looks like. We want to know what it is.
Testy, mon capitaine.
Doc, would you look this thing up in your book?
Yes. No. It's not listed here under any known objects.
Look under unknown objects.
How could it be in that book if it's unknown?
There are some things even pigs don't know.
Because at the time, I mean, you got Battlestar Galactica, you got Star Wars. Yeah. How did I blank on Pigs in Space?
I don't know. I just wanted to humiliate you on tape, and I did it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The other thing about the Muppet Show was its incorporation of its guest stars. It was like it's a variety show, and we all know from the 70s there was no shortage of variety shows. That was the big draw. Celebrity. Back then, people worshiped celebrities, and they loved seeing celebrities. Not like today. No, nothing like today.
It was a passing fad back then.
Yeah, they didn't have reality TV, but like you said earlier, this is sort of like the closest thing you could get to reality TV and variety. This was
surreality.
Exactly. Yeah, it was very surreal. But you had so many great celebrities, and they would bring in like the people who are hip.
But you did. You had the biggest of the big. I mean, late 70s, nobody's bigger than Elton John. Nobody in music is bigger than Elton John. Nobody's bigger than Steve Martin in comedy.
But the first season, Peter, do you remember like who may have been the first season's like seminal kind of or celebrities that you can name from the first season that were?
I mean, off the top of my head, Rita Moreno, Cloris Leachman, Candice Bergen.
Where did they shoot the Muppet shows? Was it in New York?
In Elstree Studios in London.
Oh, in London. Okay. See, I'm learning here. Yeah. I'm learning. But then you also, once the show became a hit, then you had like the Elton Johns kind of come on.
Yeah, for the first season, a lot of the guest stars were personal friends of Jim Henson and company, and doing it for a favor. Once it became a hit, everybody wanted to get on the show.
Yeah, right.
Before that, people were like, puppets? Me do a variety show with puppets? Why would I want to do that?
Yeah, and I mean, and then you have on the sheet here probably your favorite guest of all time, not besides Mark Hamill, of course, Milton Berle.
Milton Berle getting heckled and going back and forth
with Statler and whom?
Shut it. But literally that moment in time, I don't know how many times, every couple years I rewatch it on the YouTube, and I'll send it to you or John, because everybody who knows us will compare us to that. And the same thing, Friday night, F&H hockey for 20 years, people would just refer to John as I as that, because we did nothing but sit there and just tear everybody apart. But then with Berle, I mean, that was the Giants of the Giants, and it reminded me, and I wonder if they kind of got the idea from this, and I recommend to anybody, there's a great clip of Milton Berle getting heckled from the balcony by Henny Youngman. And it is probably my favorite 5-6 minutes of tape in the history of television. And it's very much that same thing back and forth. Like that is my favorite hands down, my favorite moment of the Muppets is Milton Berle going toe to toe with those guys.
Was Henny Youngman ever on the Muppet Show?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No, but
I'm wondering.
Yeah. But that's this clip is like early 60s that they did it. And I'm like, there's no way that they didn't think, that's a really good bit going back and forth. I think my favorite line from this, I saw the show under adverse conditions. The curtain was up.
Let's talk about the actual Muppet characters themselves.
Okay.
Lest we forget any of them. Of course, the MC, Kermit the Frog. Say hi, Kermit. Oh, am I Kermit?
I don't know who's Kermit.
Oh, hi, everybody.
Hi, Kermit the Frog here.
Yeah, see?
I'm Kermit. Hi. See, so it's
hello, you birds. This is Kermit talking to you. Then we had, of course, Fozzie Bear.
Ah!
Waka, waka, waka. Then we had...
the eye candy. The eye candy.
Yes.
I'm waiting
Piggy.
for you to introduce me.
Okay, Piggy, hold on a second. Here we go.
That's all right, Kermit. You don't have to introduce me if you don't want to. I could always just SYFFITF. Stomp your froggy face into the floor.
That's, of course, Miss Piggy, who, of course, needs no introduction. This is getting annoying now.
Gonzo,
yes.
The trumpet bit at the beginning of the show, epic.
Yes.
Every week it was different.
He rang in the show, and it was great. Watching him get blown up or, falling out of the... Speaking of things that freaked me out as a kid, that probably freaked me out the most, is like they had this amazing multi-tiered display of Muppets, and at the highest point you had Gonzo coming out of the O in the Muppet Show, and he's just like dangling over the center, and then like inevitably he would either fall out or something bad would happen.
Bubbles would come out of his trumpet or a bird or something like that.
And when we say Gonzo, we also can't leave out Camilla.
Of course you can.
No. Camilla's, of course, the chicken that he loves.
The chicken of his life, yeah.
Yep. And then we have a Scooter.
Scooter, stagehand, the trusty stagehand.
Yeah, the John
Can't do
Denver
Scooter. I
lookalike.
can't do Scooter.
No, nobody can do Scooter.
Wasn't he like his nephew or something like that? Wasn't he
his
Kermit's
uncle? His uncle. Scooter's uncle owned the theater.
Oh, the theater. Okay, I knew there was a reason he was always
Kermit had a nephew, Robin.
5 minutes to curtain, Miss.
there. Duvall.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, the stunt casting, the Harvey Kormans, and there's no way that they weren't like, that's a dream week for him to come in there and do that. One of the funny things that I didn't realize that had happened, that Peter, you probably know a lot about, the week that Richard Pryor no-showed. I think that's the weekend he had the rendezvous with Jarrell.
Never mind. Cut that part out. No,
Wasn't that when he had the accident?
What, he lit himself on fire?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but yeah. So one of the writers, Chris Langham, the episode basically involved the guest canceled, and they got a messenger off the street to do the routine.
And who was the messenger?
Chris Langham.
Oh, Chris Langham. Okay.
Chris Langham.
Just one of the writers.
One of the writers of the show.
That's great.
He must have been a stand-up or something, because he was fine.
Yeah.
He was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the jokes were written for Pryor.
Yeah, he got into some legal troubles years later.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that.
I know. Peter, do you have any other behind-the-scenes kind of nuggets of goings on in the Muppet Show? Who wrote most of the music for that show? Was it a writing, like a kind of a revolving door of writing?
You had a lot of you had your
was Joe Raposo did he do any, or was that he was more Sesame Street, I guess?
He was more Sesame Street. I mean, a lot of the songs there were either popular songs of the day, popular songs of yesterday. The show was shot in London and aired in England, but it aired in America. And the length of commercials in London, were not as long as in the United States. So they had an extra skit in them for the English audience. If you go to the DVD, it's on there now. But the American audience never saw the British skits in the original run. And a lot of times, particularly in the earlier seasons, they were old music hall songs.
I see.
So, songs from the turn of the previous century.
Right.
I mean, are we talking like the last 15 minutes of Saturday Night Live? Like, let's just throw something out there, or were these gold? Were these good?
There were some occasional ones. Some of them are forgettable. They couldn't be integral to the plot, so it usually was just another skit that went on stage. Or, as time went on, they went away from the music hall acts, and sometimes it was peripherally related to the episode, but at least in the earlier days, it was a throwaway skit.
How many seasons did the Muppet Show go?
It ran 5.
5 seasons, and only 3 of them were on DVD.
Correct.
Really?
Yep.
Legal reasons?
It's Disney reasons. I think when they released them, the DVD market went downhill, and I think there wasn't enough profit in the first 3 seasons that had come out. I'm only speculating here, but the fans are clamoring for it, and but it really, when they did the Muppets reboot a couple years ago, they really should have used that impetus to put out the remaining 2 seasons.
Yeah, there was when Muppets came out, the Muppets movie, not the Muppet movie, but the Muppets came out.
Not to be confused with the TV show.
Yeah, I know, right? But you had a year where people were like really kind of getting back into the Muppets,
which was really, and do you know much about that reboot? Because we loved it, and it was huge. You had a song that was nominated for the Academy Award, which is,
it won the Academy Award.
It did. A Muppet or a Man? I'm a very manly Muppet. That was absolutely great. But look at who was in that movie. I mean, it truly was a bunch of A-listers coming together. I think it was a huge passion project. It did well. Now, here's the thing. It's like Jason Segel. What the hell happened?
What do you mean?
He just handed it off.
He only intended to do the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was a passion project of his. He made this movie happen. At the time, I mean, it's like right around Saving Sarah Marshall. I mean, he was
Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall. He was at the top of the heap.
That was Forgetting Private Ryan too.
And he was absolutely huge, and the movie did well. And when he said, "Yeah, no, I'm not going to have anything," I mean, he was so black and white. I'm not doing any more. And people speculated, did he have a bad time? Was it heart working with Disney? Like, what happened that he was so adamant? Like,
I haven't
enjoyed
heard
doing it.
I haven't heard anything that said, that there was any ill will on it. I just assumed that he was in for this one project and he wanted to focus elsewhere.
I think I read something similar to where he said in an interview, it's like, I wanted to get this one movie up and running and then sort of like hand the reins off, like, all right, you know, based on the success of this movie that there is a thing for the Muppet. Yeah, there's a market for the Muppets. They're not corny. They're not whatever. They're not dead.
Dated.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, here. But he didn't want to be the Muppet guy, He just wanted to just sort of like, I got other things going on, maybe. I got this other show that I'm doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're back to, How I Met Your Mother, and it did well, but it didn't springboard to what I think a lot of people thought it could have or should have.
Okay, so we talked about the Muppets, but now let's talk about the Muppet Movie. Like, that's the game changer.
And that's what I said. I grew up watching the Muppet with my dad. I love the show, but when that movie came out, truly, I probably saw that in the summer that it came out 20 times in the drive-in, and I don't think if I saw it 40 times, I would have ever got tired of it. Even into today, if it comes on,
It's definitely one of those movies that you will see something new no matter how many times you see it. And you can enjoy it as a kid. You can enjoy it as an adult. Running gags.
Good grief. It's a running gag.
The Hare Krishna line alone, that guy's lost. Maybe you should try Hare Krishna.
And just like the technological marvels, like as far as Muppeteering goes, right? Or did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they broke new ground and sort of...
Yeah, I mean, just the fact, case in point is Kermit riding a bicycle.
Yeah. Was that that wasn't
Gone
Muppets,
with the Schwinn.
But that was Muppet Movie, not Muppets Take Manhattan, right?
Muppets Take Manhattan built upon that, where they actually had a group of Muppets.
Oh, right. It was
riding
like
bikes.
But
the original one was the Muppet Movie, where Kermit was riding a bike. It was the hand puppet version with handlebars for a close-up, and for the long shot, we had a marionette rig.
And I mean, the plot of the movie was just stupid.
It was wonderful.
It was wonderful, but it was just like everybody you really had to suspend disbelief that people were like buying into this.
That a bear would be driving a Studebaker.
Well, let me ask you this: what would you have thought if Henry Kissinger were a running gag in it?
I would think you were crazy, sir.
If you read the original script, there was a subplot that they had written where Henry Kissinger was supposed to be appearing at various points in the movie, trying to get into the movie, but Kermit wouldn't let him. In the stage directions, it said, "Yes, it is the real Henry Kissinger. Don't worry, we'll get him."
Wow.
They either didn't get him or they wrote him
realized
out.
he was a piece of shit.
But
Yeah, well, they already had Sam the Eagle, so.
Joe, will you and I ever be in a car and drive more than a quarter mile without saying
Bear left.
bear left, right frog?
Yeah.
Do we have the ability to get in a car?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No.
All
you
right.
have the ability to get in the car?
Right.
Not on my own. Not sober. But seriously, that line alone makes it one of my favorite movies. And of course, if you want to reenact, you want to do a little self-indulgent theater, starting with Whisper Sweet Nothings.
Whisper sweet nothings into my ear.
Motorcycle cop.
Motorcycle cop's a sweet nothing? No, motorcycle cop behind us.
Ta-da.
Keep going.
I don't know the rest of
Okay,
it.
I got it.
All right.
Hey, it's the man with the badge, the police, the cops, the PI.
Don't you dare!
Wouldn't think of it.
And what's great is Peter does the whole face and inflection.
You have
know?
to. You absolutely have to.
One of my favorite things to do, and a company that I worked for was in Hollywood. I worked in the Santa Monica office.
We're going to Hollywood?
Which shithole. I mean, Hollywood got better, but when I first got there in like the 90s, it was like, oh, does the entire sound smell like piss? Because, but I would drive by Henson Studios on La Brea, and which used to be the old Chaplin Studios, and it was just every time I drove by and you saw the Kermit statue out there, and it's such a great classic old. I mean, as you drive by it's in great condition. It looks great, but it also looks really old Hollywood. I've always loved that.
I love old Hollywood. You'll never hold anything.
Before we get off of the Muppet movie, we would be remiss if we didn't mention Rainbow Connection.
Yeah, the movie starts with one of the greatest songs in the history of cinema.
With Jim Henson in a tank underneath a log.
Wow.
Go on.
Yeah.
Go on. Seriously, I don't know the story.
Well, yeah, so basically it involved Jim Henson crouched into more or less a barrel underneath this log, water all surrounding him, and he has his hand through the log into Kermit and just performing this whole song, sitting there more or less, cramped into the space, trying to get out of it after a day's shoot. His legs, you can only imagine the cramp.
The physical thing that these people had to go through to make this happen. Now, not a lot of people know this, but the banjo playing in that was done by Steve Martin.
You are kidding me.
No, I'm just making it up. But he was a guest,
I knew
and it sounds completely plausible, doesn't it?
Oh, and sure, when you put it that way.
No, because he was a guest. He was a fan. He loves...
And he was in the Muppet movie.
Right.
That's
so,
right.
And
but
he loves playing the banjo, but, hey, don't look... Facts get in the way of a really great Jacques retelling of a story.
I've performed that song at karaoke more times than I can count, but usually when I did it, I would do it as a duet, or for between Kermit and Miss Piggy. I don't think I ever did the song the same way twice. The only constant is that Miss Piggy would get the line
About the sailors.
All right.
Well done.
Yes.
You made it your own.
Yeah.
Now, so the movie didn't, the reboot didn't spawn what I had hoped, or like a lot of people hoped. But one of the things that I do like is it's waned here and there, but the Muppets have never really gone off the map, or haven't gone off the map like completely. And one
completely no, almost completely yes.
And one of the things that I love when you asked what my favorite bit is, my single favorite bit in the history of the Muppets, other than Statler, and I'm not even going to say it, so shut up! Don't even try to make me. Is this thing that's been going on since the show? Animal drum battles. And through like the last 40 years, it started, I think it started with Buddy Rich when Buddy Rich was on the show. It was a great animal drum battle. Recently, it's been Travis Barker from Blink-182. Him and David Grohl did it. And even Animal appeared on Arsenio Hall to do a drum battle with Arsenio's drummer.
It wasn't so much a drum versus drum battle, but it was definitely a drum versus singing battle. Season 1 of The Muppet Show, Rita Moreno trying to sing Fever while Animal is lusting after her and going over the drums, and, she just lets him have it.
OK Go did a video with them. And the Weezer video is pretty great, where Miss Piggy kidnaps the drummer and truly has him tied up in his kind of having her way with him in the dressing room. And at the last minute, Animal has to fill in for the drummer of Weezer. It's a great, great, great video called Gone Fishing. Highly recommend that.
Yeah, that was definitely post Muppets Tonight during that nebulous, not really doing much phase.
The Muppet movie came after the Muppet Show ended.
Nope. Actually, it was season 4, around season 4 of the Muppet Show was the Muppet Movie. They came back for one more season, ended the show, did Great Muppet Caper, followed by Muppets Take Manhattan, and then which spawned the Muppet Babies.
All right.
Worst thing ever. I am not a fan of the Muppet Babies.
Are we talking the original one or the recent reboot?
Any of them.
I like the 80s Muppet Babies. Thank
you.
I was 10 when it came out. I don't know.
I liked it when when it was on. You can't watch it as an adult.
I did try rewatching it as an adult, and I'm like, it's
punch yourself in the face.
Why do you have such a black soul? But I don't understand.
I think the Muppet Babies were more interesting, for lack of a better word, in the Muppets Take Manhattan movie. Where they were actually puppets performed by the original artist rather than an animated segment. I would have liked to have seen the Muppet Babies to actually have been done as a puppet series rather than an animated series.
You're right. The whole appeal of the Muppets was that it's puppetry, or Muppetry. But then to take that element away and just start, replace it with standard animation, it's like, okay, it's just another kiddie show on like Saturday morning. But it was probably one of the more better produced Saturday morning cartoons, because aside from that and like Ghostbusters, like the rest of the landscape of Saturday morning was shit. But I digress.
Now, where do you guys weigh in? It's like
About 175. Oh.
I wish I was. Jim Henson. How untimely was his death, and how much did that just? And the sad story behind him. I mean, had he gone to the doctor the night before, he'd probably still be alive today.
Well, the point of the matter is that, whether he'd be alive today is debatable, but he would not have died then.
Right. And how much longer would they have been sustained? Do you think they would have stayed in prominence longer, or do you think his death was pretty much what had them waning?
Just before his death, he was looking to sell the Muppet product to Disney, and part of the deal was that they would get him to do other stuff. But with his death, that kind of fell by the wayside, and Disney never acquired them at that point. And the Muppets were sold later on to a German company who pretty much did nothing with it. And eventually the Henson family bought the rights back, ultimately selling it to Disney years later, which brought about the reboot. That took even years after their acquisition. But I don't know how long the Muppets would have sustained if he had not died at that point, but it certainly would not have gone the way that it did.
What are some of your favorite Jim Henson, Frank Oz, not Muppet specific projects?
Was it the Strip Club by Jim Henson?
Are you talking about the Labyrinth or Dark Crystal?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Those are that's my wife's favorite stuff by him. She liked the Muppets, but Dark Crystal and Labyrinth are two of her favorite movies.
Those two were, you have to say, really were ahead of their time. It just wasn't, they become cult classics now, but when they came out, there was the mindset of, well, these aren't the Muppets. Why are we doing this? And just the amount of technological breakthroughs that they did to do the puppetry in these films is mind-boggling. I mean, even doing it today is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there is also Fraggle Rock. Lest we forget Fraggle Rock. I mean, it's beyond your time.
It was I remember when I would go to Buffalo, and that was on HBO, and that was one of the only cool things about my dad's house is he had HBO and we didn't.
I don't think Frank Oz actually worked on the Fraggles.
Oh, no?
No. I don't know the reason why he didn't, but I think of the Muppeteers, he was the one that didn't carry over.
I see. I don't know anything about the Muppets. Are they puppet stuff or what is it?
And so now isn't there a new rated R movie coming out with puppets? It's causing a big kerfuffle.
Oh yeah, was that the Happy Land
the Happy Land Murders?
Happy Land Murders.
Happy Town Murders.
I'm not sure. Yeah, they're basically.
It's a Brian Henson movie.
Yes, but they used a promotion gag, basically saying it's not something like it wasn't. The street. It referred to Sesame Street.
Right. No Sesame All Street or something like that.
So, something to that effect. Yeah. And, which Sesame Workshop took offense to it because, they didn't want this really, really raunchy adult puppet film to be associated with Sesame Street or being mixed up. And
just the word Sesame in their promotional material is just enough, I mean, Avenue Q, which is the musical.
You're a big fan of that. I'm
not a big fan. I was late to the party, but Peter is. Avenue Q
is on my bucket list of shows to do.
I mean, but Avenue Q, for those of you who don't know, is a parody of Sesame Street, but it's a darker side of Sesame Street. All the characters are kind of, dysfunctional in their own way.
30 somethings.
Yes, exactly.
Trying to find their way in
It's like Rent meets Sesame Street. Ish. Yeah. But I mean, it's great songs. But one of the other producers of Avenue Q was a guy. A lot of those people were from Sesame.
Yeah, I mean, in the original cast, John Tartaglia, at one point, he performed a bunch of incidental characters on Sesame Street. He voiced Ernie for not Sesame Street itself, but a Sesame Street offshoot program. Stephanie D'Abruzzo was on Sesame Street before Avenue Q, and she's the current voice of Prairie Dawn and Zoe, taking over from Fran Brill after she retired. And there's a couple other cast members. Most of the cast members from the original cast of Avenue Q were on Sesame Street at one point or another.
You collect Muppet paraphernalia or puppets or?
To some degree, yeah.
I was telling Jacques before we started recording is that I have my video game wall, but you have kind of your Muppet wall with the Muppet characters and the play sets that were released in the late early 2000s.
Yeah, it was a company by the name of Palisades put out a series of Muppet action figures, and had some really great detail to them. And they've also put out some play sets that involved sets of the of the Muppet Show, including one of them being the Muppet Backstage. Sadly, they went under and didn't completely finish the line. They were actually trying to do a Sesame Street line as well, and there was
that would have been fantastic.
They as a convention only promo, there was a Grover and Super Grover, and actually came with a phone booth. And there was a prototype, a really, really kick-ass prototype for Big Bird. The gimmick in this one was that they would release a couple figures in a set, and in the packaging would be a piece of the street.
Wow!
So you would just collect the whole thing, and ultimately have the whole street by the time it was done. But unfortunately, they went under. And around the same time, I think it was Master Replicas, and I'm not sure, but they also put out, what they call, poser Muppets. They weren't actually the puppets themselves. They have a wire skeleton, and they are the full body characters taken from the original patterns. And they released Kermit, Animal, and then Gonzo, of which I have the 3. They were planning on doing a Rizzo, a Fozzie, and down the line a Miss Piggy. But I think they lost the license. I think they still exist doing other, sci-fi replicas and things of that nature. But they...
it's kind of like trying to catch lightning in a bottle again with Muppets. It's like they have really passionate people and talented people working on these tie-ins for the Muppets. But then it's just like not enough to kind of catch fire to keep it going.
I mean, you got to figure. I mean, Kermit stood probably about, 2.5 feet tall. And sold for like $250 or something to that effect. And
perfect for the holiday season.
Yeah, that's a niche market.
Yeah,
thing.
and then you had Animal, who was full size, and he had to be about 4 feet tall.
Yikes! I've seen him. Yeah.
Yes, and he's hanging from a coat rack in my office, and that was probably $500-$600 for that. And you got to figure if you keep things in scale, they planned on doing Rizzo because he was smaller and it would be a smaller price point. But there was definitely a prototype out there for Fozzie, and you got to figure that he probably would have stood a good 3.5 to 4 feet tall and probably about 3 feet wide. And probably would have gone well over $1,000 for it.
Worth it.
Right.
Says Bill Gates.
Before we forget, I wanted to get your opinion on Steve Whitmire. So Steve Whitmire took over for the voice of Kermit when Jim Henson passed, and then had since within the last 6 months or so, unceremoniously was let go by the Henson Company for reasons kind of unknown. Or do you know more about it? And because from what I've heard from the Hensons themselves, it's like he was kind of a pain in the ass to work with, or they would butt heads on a lot of things, and he and Steve sort of maybe took more ownership in the character of Kermit than maybe he should have.
I think I had heard that he had done, it was, really hard on, some of the other puppeteers, really giving them notes when he shouldn't be the one giving the notes. And, he was just really...
He was a kind of a control freak when it came to Kermit.
To what I understand, I think, without having been there myself, I can't say for sure who's at fault.
But let's say so anyway, because we're on a podcast.
I don't know, and if I were to guess, only because it came from the Hensons themselves, I would side with them, but I don't know enough about it really to comment on it. Matt Vogel, who has taken over the Kermit role, I can say nothing but good things about him from what I've seen. He does he's the puppet coach on Sesame Street. He's taken over Big Bird from Carol Spinney. He took over all of Jerry Nelson's characters when he understudied Jerry Nelson before he passed, and then took over Floyd and the Count from Sesame Street, and gradually taken over various characters. And I think he does a really good Kermit. I mean, his Kermit is probably closer voice-wise to Jim's than Steve's. But again, it's really just a matter of I mean, I don't want to take sides in the issue, is what it comes down to.
Peter, do you have the great unproduced Muppet TV reboot or movie in your on a hard drive somewhere that you've just been waiting for the chance to spring on the world? Is that like the dream gig? Would that be to produce a Muppet thing, or is that just...
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I always, particularly, in my late teens, going into college and stuff like that, realizing that, I could do some of the Frank Oz voices, Miss Piggy being probably my best voice of the bunch. My Fozzie is a little bit more rusty than I
Your
thought.
Fozzie is kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, but there was a period of time where I was like, before Frank Oz stopped doing the characters, there was that mindset of like, I would someday love to be to take over for Frank Oz, and so Eric Jacobson was never my friend. Basically. No, I mean Eric Jacobson's doing a great job doing the voices, but there was always that. The pipe dream mindset. It's like, I mean, I would work for the Muppets in a heartbeat if I had the opportunity.
Because you usually, from what I understand, like if you're coming in through the ranks, you start off as like a right-hand man,
literally,
because Muppets are typically run by two people. Like one does the mouth, and the left hand.
There's two common types of Muppet characters. There's the rod puppet, where you basically have the puppeteer usually uses their right hand in the head, and the arms are controlled with rods.
Yes, like Kermit.
Like Kermit, like Bert.
Yep.
Those are the two examples of that. And occasionally you might have a second puppeteer if they're doing some big choreography with the arms. You'll have a second puppeteer take the right hand. The right rod to do that. But then we have the live hand puppet, where you've got the main puppeteer. In the live hand puppet would be Fozzie, Ernie, those type of characters. And you have the main puppeteer is working the head in his right hand. The puppeteer's left hand is in a glove that is the left hand of the puppet. And then you have a second puppeteer literally in the armpit of the first puppeteer with his right hand in the right hand glove and trying to do that coordination.
The deodorant budget on that show, man, it's got to be.
When you see behind the scenes photographs of what when two puppets are talking to each other or doing a dance,
and they're watching
number,
everything on a monitor below, and it's crazy.
They're all sandwiched in there.
Particularly the dance segments, at least in the earlier seasons, both characters in the couple are the same performer.
Oh, that's interesting.
Later on, they've had other actors, doing it, but if you listen closely, particularly if you know who's doing what characters, they're the same character because it's a lot easier for them to do that interchange up close
than it is,
right? Than to try to rely on time.
But seriously, Google image like the behind the scenes when you have 4 or 5 guys or gals and guys sandwiched behind what's going on, and they look like human pretzels.
An exception to this live hand rule, going back to your Swedish Chef with the actually literally live hands, that was originally Jim Henson doing the head and the voice, and it was both Frank Oz's hands doing the manipulation.
Right, because
they were live hands.
There's no, it would be weird to sync up one person's right hand and another person's left hand. Yeah.
Well, especially with such complicated ingredients that you are mixing.
Bork, bork, bork. Oh man, I wish we could do Muppets all day. And
every
we can.
Day. My last question for Peter is or do you know what's next with on the Muppets front and not Sesame Street? Is there anything in the works that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of, but I do want to kind of plug a documentary that came out recently called Muppet Guys Talking. It was a documentary that was done a few years back, or shot a few years back when Jerry Nelson was still alive. Frank Oz's wife got together, Frank, Dave Goles, who did Gonzo among other characters, Jerry Nelson, who
he kind of talked. He had like the high pitched kind of
Jerry Nelson was
voice.
Count Von Count and Floyd Pepper, Fran Brill, who was who primarily did Sesame Street. She was Prairie Dawn. She was.
I love Prairie Dawn,
and she was Zoe and a couple other and a bunch of anything Muppets. Oh, and Bill Beretta, who started on Muppets Tonight, his main character is Pepe the King Prawn, and he has since taken over the role of Dr. Teeth and Rolf. So the 5 of them got together and just basically Muppet guys talking, sitting around on a couch, just telling stories and things of that nature.
Is it on Netflix?
I want to say it's MuppetGuysTalking.com.
Okay.
So just Google Muppet Guys Talking.
Yeah, and you'll find it there.
Peter, again, thank you for being our first, probably only 2-time guest on a sideshow.
I would never 2-time you.
See what he did.
Much.
It is absolutely, no, seriously. It's like we love people who know more about the stuff that we love, because most of it is just us making it up or taking Wikipedia's word for it. So thank you for coming back in.
You're welcome.
And I want to plug your YouTube channel, Zingcat, Xing,
Yes.
Cat, with George the Self-Esteem Cat, and Dog.
Sullivan Spaniel, and
Pixie and
Pixie and Pica is a
Pica.
new series that we've started. It's so basically we're doing on this channel a lot of Muppet-esque type of humor and Muppet-esque type of puppetry.
I think that's it. I mean,
Do you want to go out on Am I a Muppet or a Man?
why are there so many songs about rainbows?
Finally, something other than second-rate entertainment on this show. Oh, really? What's that? Third-rate entertainment. Oh!
Oh, and Jacques, don't forget.
Statler?
Yeah, what?
Is that it?
Yes, it's over. How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.